Hi, this is Al Williams of Sunset Hill Solutions. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps required to create a multi-source enabled universe. With the new version of Business Objects 4.0, you have the ability to create a universe that pulls data from multiple databases and even multiple database platforms. For those of you with previous experience with Business Objects prior to version 4.0, you'll note that you could previously create a report in Business Objects that pulled from multiple universes, but in order to do that you'd have to merge dimensions. And for a lot of regular users of Business Objects, report writers, etc., merging dimensions wasn't an easy thing to wrap their head around. By creating a multi-source enabled universe, it makes it much more transparent for the users and much easier to create reports where data is required from multiple databases. For the purposes of this demo, I'm using data from the AdventureWorks Data Warehouse. It's a sample Microsoft Data Warehouse database that contains dimension and fact tables, and it's a really good resource if you're trying to practice with business objects, and it's one that I use regularly. In order to download the AdventureWorks SQL Server database, if you don't already have it, simply go to codeplex.com and do a search on AdventureWorks DW, and it'll be the first item that comes up on the list. So in this demo, I'm going to be using data from the AdventureWorks DW 2008 database, which is on an instance of SQL Server R2 2008. So this is SQL Server 2008 Release 2 on this local machine. The other database that I'll be pulling from is called bo4_demo, and it's on a SQL Server 2005 instance on the same machine. These could very well be separate SQL servers, or they could be a SQL Server and an Oracle. They don't have to be the same platform in order to have multi-source enabled universes. So what I've done in order to make this example work is I've created a copy of the fact finance table that was in the AdventureWorks DW 2008 database. So our bo_4demo database on our SQL Server 2005 contains this one fact table. And what we'll be doing in this demo is linking this fact table to the dimension tables in the AdventureWorks database. Okay, now that we've got the environment set up, I've opened up Information Design Tool. So we'll go ahead and we'll create a new project. We'll file New Project, and we'll call this project Multi-Source Demo. Click on Finish, and you can see we have a new empty project here. The next step is to create the two connections we're going to need for this universe. There's two ways of doing that. When I have the project selected, if I go to File, New, then Relational Connection, or I can just right click on the project here and go New Relational Connection. Okay, so the first connection I've named CONN/SQL 2008. This is what we're going to connect to our SQL Server 2008 database with, and I put in a description: connection to SQL Server 2008 instance. The description is optional. I just put one in for the sake of the demo. I'll click on Next. Now this is where I select the database platform. Go to Microsoft, and I want to go SQL Server 2008 OLEDB providers. Click on Next. Now this is where I fill in all the credentials for the database. For this demo, I'm using the default authentication mode, which is use specified username and password. I've entered the username and password and the server this is on. So this is on an instance of SQL Server 2008 R2, and the name of the database AdventureWorks DW 2008. I'll test the connection, and it's successful. Click on Finish. Now we can see there's a tab that's opened up with the information about this connection. It has all of the parameters, all the information related to this database connection. If I expand the project now, I also see the connection listed underneath it. Now I have to create the second connection we're going to use. I'm going to go with New Relational Connection. So I'm going to call this connection CONN/SQL 2005, or connecting to SQL Server 2005. Now I'll go ahead and select the database platform, Microsoft, SQL Server 2005, OLEDB providers. I'll click on Next. Okay, again, I've used the default authentication mode. The server in this case is a SQL Server 2005 instance, and the database is the bo4demo database. I'll click on Finish. And now we can see that we have the 2005 connection and the 2008 connection in our multi-source demo project. So these connections that I've created here, these are local to my development PC, my development box. These connections have not yet been published to the repository, and so if I want to create a report using these connections on in InfoView, for example, I wouldn't be able to do that because the connections are only local to this machine right now. So I want to go ahead and publish both of these connections to a repository. I'll click on Next, and I'm just going to put them in the connections folder. I'm not going to create a subfolder. And Finish. Connection was published successfully. Do you want to create a connection shortcut in the same local folder? Yes. So we will do that. Close. I'll do the same thing with the SQL Server 2008 connection. Click on Next. Finish. And again, we want to create a shortcut. Okay. Since I published my connections to the repository, I really don't need to keep these local connections anymore. So I can go ahead and delete them. And I'll just be left with the shortcuts to the connections in the repository. At this point, we've created our project, multi-source demo. We've created a connection to SQL Server 2005 and a connection to SQL Server 2008. So in older versions of Business Objects, once you created your connection, you would start developing your universe. With the new version of Business Objects, there's two layers that make up the universe in addition to the connections. One is called the data foundation and one is called the business layer. So we will work on the data foundation next. So I'll go New Data Foundation. I've named the data foundation DF Multi-Source Demo, and I've given a description, Data Foundation for the Multi-Source Universe Demo. I'll go ahead and click on Next. And this is where I select multi-source enabled because we are going to be using connection to SQL Server 2005 and 2008 for this data foundation. I will click on Next, and we'll see the two connections that are in our project, the two shortcuts to the connections we've published to the repository. I want to click on both of these. Click on Next. The next step is to define the connection properties for the two connections in the data foundation. So this is where you can select the color for the table headers for each of the different connections so that when you're creating your data foundation, you'll know which database these come from. So I will leave the default blue for the SQL Server 2005 connection. For 2008, we'll go with the orange, and we'll click on Finish. Now we'll go ahead and add the tables that we want from the databases that make up our connections. So for the connection to SQL Server 2005, we have the BO4 _ demo database, and we have only the one table, which is a finance fact table. So I'll just drag that over here, and now we see that fact finance table shown in the design panel here. The fact finance table has keys to tables containing the dimensions that we're going to report against. So we have a date key, organization key, department group key, scenario key, account key, and then we have the amount field, which is a measure. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into our SQL Server 2008 connection, and we're going to add the tables that we want to add into this data foundation from AdventureWorks DW 2008, and these will be all the dimension tables. The first table we'll add from our SQL Server 2008 connection is the dim date table, and you can see here that the header color for this table is different than for the fact finance. This is a very good visual indicator that these two tables are coming from different data sources. So I dragged and dropped over all of the dimension tables into this data foundation. So at this point I need to make the connections between the keys so we can tie in the fact finance table to these dimension tables. And the way you do that is just click on the field, drag it over. So now we have a relationship between the date key in the fact finance and the date key in the dim date. You'll see the two question marks here. This means that it's not sure what the cardinality should be. So I right click here and say detect cardinality, it goes ahead and it checks the data in both tables and it determines that it's a many to one cardinality. In order to save a little bit of time, I've gone ahead and created the remaining connections between the fact finance table, which is on our SQL Server 2005 connection, and all of our dimension tables, which are on our SQL Server 2008 connection. A couple things I like to point out is you can have different views of the data foundation by clicking on these connections down here. So for example, if I click on the data foundation selection, I can drill down and see for each of the connections, each of the tables, and fields that make up this data foundation. And if I click on any field, I can see that this fiscal semester field, for example, is an integer data type, and it gives me other information about this field. Summarize what we've done so far. We've created a new project, an information design tool called Multi-Source Demo, created a connection to SQL Server 2005, and a connection to SQL Server 2008. We've also created the data foundation for this universe, and we've created all the joins between the fact tables and the dimension tables in this data foundation. The next step in this demo is to create the business layer for a multi-source demo project. So we'll right click on the project, new business layer. We'll be using a relational data foundation. It'll be the data foundation that we just created. So I've gone ahead and named this business layer BL multi-source demo, and I've given a description business layer for the multi-source demo. I'll go ahead and click on next. This is where I select the data foundation. You can have one or more data foundations in your project, and this is the one that we just created. I'll select OK. Now, the next option you have is whether or not you want to allow business objects to automatically create the folders and objects for all connections. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and leave this checked. It all depends on your preferences. Sometimes you may want to do this all by yourself. I can still go ahead and clean this up after it's created the folders and all the objects for this business layer, which is what I'm going to do in this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and let business objects create all these for me. Click on Finish. Now we have our business layer for the multi-source demo project, and you can see it looks a little bit like the data foundation that's showing me all of the tables within the data foundation and all of the joins. It's also showing me a few options here, for example, query options. One thing I'm going to change right away is to limit the result size of the result set. The default is 5,000 rows, which quite often is not enough. I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 50,000. And you can put comments. If there's any custom properties you want to add for this universe, you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to save the project now that I made that change. The other thing you'll notice is created two folders, one for each of the connections in the data foundation. And we're going to change this up a bit because I really don't like to have the name of the connection for the folder here. And I don't like to have the full name of the table for the objects in the business layer. So let's go ahead and clean up some of the folder names here that were created automatically when we created this business layer. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this folder to dimensions. And I'm going to go ahead and change each of the dimension table folder names to just the name of the dimension. So for example, I'm going to change dim date to just date. So now you can see I have a dimensions folder. I have a folder with all the date dimensions, all the account dimensions, department group, organization, and scenario dimensions. Now when Business Objects created this business layer, it brought in every field from the tables. We do not need to keep the primary key field for each of the dimension tables, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those for each one of these tables because they're really not necessary. You're never going to report on the primary key, or very rarely anyways. And organization key, get rid of that. And the scenario key. So now we're left with the actual dimensions that we're going to be reporting against in this multi-source demo universe. Now I'll do some housekeeping on the Con SQL 2005 folder. I'm going to go ahead and rename this Measures. And then in Fact Finance, the only field that we want from this table is the measure, the amount measure. We do not need all of these keys. You're not going to be reporting on the keys. They're there internally to keep the relationships between the fact and the dimension tables. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this amount field right underneath measures. I'm going to go ahead and delete this Fact Finance folder. And now I want to change this amount object to a measure. So let's just have a look at this amount object here. We can see what the select statement is. We're selecting against the SQL Server 2005 connection, Fact Finance amount field. Now we want this amount field to be a measure because we're going to be reporting on financial numbers here. And the way I turn this dimension into a measure is I right click on it and turn into measure with aggregate function, and we're going to be wanting to sum the amount. So now you see the icon has changed between the amount, or for the amount field. It shows this orange icon, whereas all the dimensions show a blue kind of square icon. So a good visual indicator this amount field is actually a measure now. Now we're ready to publish our business layer to the repository. We've created two connections. We've created the data foundation and we've created the business layer. I'm going to go ahead and right click on our business layer and select publish to repository. Select resources to save. I want to save the data foundation and the business layer before we publish. Click OK. Click on next. And we'll just publish it to the default universes folder. Okay, the universe has been published successfully. And I'm going to go ahead and close Information Design Tool. Then we'll go into create a report using Web Intelligence and to show how this universe works. So let's start BI Launchpad. I'm going to log in as user Allan W. So now I want to create a report with that universe we just published. I'm going to go to Applications, Web Intelligence Application. Generally takes a minute or two to load the first time you go in here. So we're in BI Launchpad and we've opened up a Web Intelligence session. I want to create a new Web Intelligence report, so I click on this icon right over here. And be prompted to select the universe. It's going to load the list of available universes. And I'm going to select the multi-source demo universe. And click on select. So now we see the query panel. I can see all of the dimensions and the one measure that we created in our business layer. I'm going to go ahead and start building the report now. So let's pick some of the dimensions we want to report. We want it to report by month and account type and organization. And then we will add in the amount measure. Let's go ahead and run this query and see what results we get. Okay, so we do have results returned from this query. I just double clicked on this column header in order to so that we could see the results here. So we have created a report that uses connections from a SQL Server 2005 and a SQL Server 2008 database. and we can see that it works. So thank you for watching this demo of how to create multi-source enabled universes in Business Objects 4. Please visit sunsethill.ca to have a look at the other videos that we have available for Business Objects 4. Thank you for watching.